The 7th of September 1940. On every German airfield in northern France, the picture was the same. 965 German bombers and fighters were ready to go. The Luftwaffe wanted to force a decision. They called it the air battle for England. Morale was high.
Wir fühlten uns absolut überlegen und ich persönlich glaubte, dass England genauso besiegt würde wie Polen und Frankreich.
The scale of the German attack far exceeded anything seen before.
And the drone of the bombers going to London, I'll remember to the day I die. It was the most mournful drone. And my mother used to say, poor old London. That's where they were going.
At 5 p.m, the first wave of bombers reached the target area.
And I was playing cards with my friends in the flat. And suddenly, out of the blue, this Saturday afternoon, on September the 7th, there was a massive air attack on the London docks.
The Luftwaffe planned to sever London's lifeline, cutting off supplies to her 8 million people.
The large industrial areas, tar distilleries, sugar refineries, timber yards, flour mills, and things of that nature, were all cheek by jowl, and they had all been built there, and the homes of the workers had been built close by so that they could get to work very easily.
The bombs came like a bolt from the blue.
And my family were 100 yards away in a house with relatives, and the bomb dropped. Then I ran along there, and the whole front of the house was smashed in. There was an underground kitchen, basement kitchen. I clambered through the wreckage, and I heard screams, and I recognised my wife's voice, and I recognised my mother-in-law's voice. And I said, it's all right, it's all over, it's all over, stop screaming.
Worse was to come. A rain of bombs such as no city had ever seen. 12 hours without a break, and at night for the first time. No one who was there will ever forget it.
It's a funny thing, something comes over you that you think, well, I'm going to die. And you get it in your mind, and there's nothing you can do about it. But I never thought I'd see daylight again, not after that night. The whole place was rocking, you know.
My uncle and cousin were killed in the same night. Uncle was killed outright and only had a small bruise on the top of his forehead. Auntie was in shock. Her son was 4 or 5 hours in her lap, bleeding to death.
How did a bomber pilot feel?
Da unten brennt's und sie hoffen, dass es das Ziel ist, das brennt. Sie kriegen eigentlich nichts mit von irgendwelchem menschlichen Leid. Man fliegt nicht gerade mit einem schlechten Gewissen weg, aber ritterlich empfindet man auch nicht.
In a young woman's diary, the seed of the bombing terror to come in Germany.
Now the war has got right inside me. I frighten myself. For the first time in my life, I feel hatred.
And I looked at this and I thought, my goodness, I don't think we can stand up to this. I thought that it was going to be too much for us.
In his diary, Goebbels recorded what the Nazi leaders hoped to achieve. The first taste for London. Ever-increasing devastation and fear will lead inevitably to demoralization. The inferno lasted 57 nights. The fires were worse than the bombing.
The things that worried me more than the bombs was the fire ones. The assembly ones, when they used to let the baskets out of the aeroplane, all alight, and they used to drift down and set everything on fire. That was terrible, that was. That was worse than the bombing, because if the bomb was going to hit you, you wouldn't have known nothing about it, but then burnt to death is worse. But they kept doing it and doing it. Why, I don't know. Silly things. He must have been a real maniac.
Hitler's aggression had a specific goal. The defiant British Isles were to make peace with Germany. Before conquering the East, the warlord needed quiet in the West. One man withheld it from him: Winston Churchill, Hitler's nemesis. Since Dunkirk, Churchill had been the last hope in defeat. The fall of France in June 1940 was also the defeat of the British Expeditionary Force. Churchill organized its evacuation from the beaches. Almost all its equipment was abandoned, but 380,000 men were saved.
And the one thing that buoyed us all up was the words of Winston Churchill, who was the man for the scene. He was our saviour at that time.
We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
He echoed the sentiments of the nation. That's how we were. And he was just a representative, if you like, of how we felt.
While the Home Guard was clumsily training for the real thing, the Reich Radio broadcast Hitler's last warning. He called it a peace offer.
Mr. Churchill hat es soeben wieder erklärt, dass den Krieg will. In dieser Stunde fühle ich mich verpflichtet, vor meinem Gewissen noch einmal einen Appell an die Vernunft auch in England zu richten. Ich sehe keinen Grund, der zur Fortführung dieses Kampfes zwingen könnte.
Churchill's answer: he would have no dealings with that man. Hitler had not expected that. He'd overreached himself so soon. Operation Sea Lion, a last attempt to persuade the stubborn British. This was no peace overture, but a cool bluff. The props for an invasion were thrown together.
Wir waren also richtig sprachlos, wie wir die Boote sahen, auf die wir eingeteilt wurden. Das waren Elbkähne, das waren Rheinkähne. Bei den Motorschiffen hatte man vorne den Bug abgeschnitten und mit Bohlen versehen, zum Ein- und Ausladen. Wir wunderten uns, was soll das eigentlich? Bis dann so irgendjemand auf den Gedanken kam, wollen die mit den Dingern etwa nach England?
There was no camouflage. British reconnaissance was meant to notice the threat. 2,000 boats converted into landing barges. Goebbels noted in his diary, "No invasion is planned, but to confuse the enemy we will talk about it in the propaganda."
Dass das mit diesen Booten nicht durchführbar war, das haben wir ja schon bei unseren Übungen gemerkt. Und dass dieses ganze Unternehmen unmöglich geplant war. Vor allem deswegen, weil ja nicht alle Boote motorisiert waren. Es war sowieso schon bei normalem Wasser schwierig. Wenn es Wellen gab, war so ein Kahn auf See ziemlich hilflos.
Was Hitler's threatening stance taken seriously across the Channel?
Yes, when they thought that Hitler was going to invade the coast, where he would come nobody knew, but they were prepared, or getting prepared as much as